My sister didn't just steal my fiancé, she sent me a gold-embossed wedding invite like nothing happened. And just when I thought I could handle it, she took the mic at the reception and said something that nearly made the room gasp. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted the most, this story isn't just drama, it's the closure you didn't know you needed. If you had asked me a year ago what my life looked like, I would have said it felt like standing on the edge of something extraordinary. At 30, I had a career I loved, a man I trusted, and a future that seemed carefully paved with gold. My name is Emma Carter, and at the time, I was the senior marketing director for a boutique design firm in downtown Seattle, managing campaigns for luxury brands, fielding client praise daily, and running my own team with a precision that made me both admired and, frankly, a little feared. My days were full, my nights were warm, and my calendar had the kind of structure that gave me comfort. Order was something I cherished, not because I feared chaos, but because I had grown up surrounded by so much of it. I was the older daughter, the one who fixed things, the dependable one. And maybe, if I'm honest, the one who never really allowed herself to fall apart. I was engaged to Nathan Whitaker, a financial consultant who had this gentle steadiness that people mistook for boring, but I loved it. After 5 years together, he proposed one quiet evening on Bainbridge Island. It wasn't grand or dramatic. We just finished dinner at our favorite waterfront cafe, and he pulled out the ring right there by the ferry dock with a sunset smeared behind him like a painting. "Emma," he said, voice low, eyes searching mine. "I want a life with you, nothing flashy. Just something real." I said yes without hesitation. The diamond was modest, but classic, and I wore it like a promise I believed in more than anything. Everyone said we were perfect together. We had the kind of compatibility that felt effortless. We didn't fight, we planned, we built. Nathan was the kind of man who remembered to buy almond milk because he knew I hated cow's milk in my coffee. He read The New Yorker recycled religiously and always took off his shoes at the door. He didn't ignite fireworks in me, but he made me feel safe. And for a girl who'd spent her childhood trying to manage emotions bigger than herself, safe was its own kind of miracle. Then there was Claire. Claire is my younger sister by 3 years, and, as people have always said, usually right in front of me, the beautiful one. Where I was angular and sharp-featured, Claire was softness and glow. Blonde curls, wide green eyes, the kind of smile that made strangers want to confess secrets. Growing up, our parents adored us both, but differently. I was praised for my achievements, honor rolls, internships, scholarships. Claire was adored for her charm, her art, her presence. Emma's the smart one. Claire's the creative spirit, people would say, like we were characters written to balance each other out. I don't think they realized how much that stuck. Our childhood was mostly happy on the surface. We built pillow forts together, played make-believe for hours, and stayed up whispering secrets across the hallway after bedtime. But even then, I think something was building quietly inside Claire. The comparisons never stopped. Emma got another A. Claire, why don't you apply yourself more? Emma's leading the debate team. Claire, did you even turn in your science project? I was never trying to outshine her. I was just doing what I thought was expected. But I think to Claire I became the measuring stick, and that kind of measuring makes people feel small. As we grew older, we stayed close, but it became complicated. I got my MBA while Claire drifted between majors. I moved to Seattle while Claire stayed in Portland trying to make it as a freelance photographer. Our lives were different, but we always found our way back to each other through texts, birthday, dinners, and family holidays. I believed that no matter how different we were, blood would hold us together. I thought we had grown out of the rivalry, matured into something better. Looking back, there were signs. Claire's compliments always had a peculiar edge to them. "You look great in that dress." "I mean, for your figure." Or, "Nathan seems nice. A little quiet, but you need someone low-key, right?" I laughed them off, chalked it up to sibling teasing. I didn't see it then that she still measured herself against me. That maybe in some way she still felt like the lesser one. That the more I seemed to have it all, the more she quietly seethed beneath a polished smile. Still, I invited her into every part of my life. She helped me pick the color scheme for our wedding. She came dress shopping, snapped candid photos of me sipping champagne in ivory silk, told me I looked like a woman who had everything. I believed she meant it. I wanted to believe we were in a new chapter. That old shadows had been outgrown. And to be fair, she never crossed any clear line. Not until the day she did. The morning it all began to unravel. I was in New York for a pitch meeting. It was a Thursday, cloudy and brisk, and I had wrapped earlier than expected. A last-minute flight change and a sudden impulse to surprise Nathan had me landing back in Seattle by dinner. I texted him I'd be home tomorrow just as I boarded the plane, thinking it would be fun to show up with his favorite Thai takeout. Romantic even. Spontaneity wasn't my thing, but I was starting to think maybe it could be. I still had my key to his apartment even though we'd begun looking at homes to buy together. We had a list of neighborhoods, a shared Zillow folder. Our future was not a question. It was a series of checkboxes. So I let myself in. At first I thought he wasn't home. The lights were dim, the place unusually silent. But his phone was buzzing on the kitchen island, vibrating every few seconds with text after text. I don't know what made me look. I'm not the jealous type, or at least I never used to be. But maybe somewhere inside something already knew. The screen lit up again. A message preview last night was amazing. I can still feel you. And beneath it, Claire. By the time Nathan walked through the door carrying a bag of groceries and a dazed look, everything had changed. And yet in that moment, he was still smiling until he saw me standing there holding his phone like it was radioactive. Emma, he said, the name falling from his lips like a dropped glass. You're early. I wish I could say I screamed. That I threw something, that I told him to go to hell, but I didn't. I just looked at him, looked past him, looked into the space where our future had lived and saw nothing. I hadn't even begun to comprehend the weight of betrayal. That would come later. For now there was only stillness. A stillness that comes before everything breaks. I don't remember dropping the phone, but I must have, because the clatter of it hitting the tile was what broke the silence. Nathan stood in the doorway, frozen, like if he didn't move, maybe time would rewind itself. He didn't speak. I didn't either. The room felt suspended, like the air had thickened into something heavy and sharp. He set the grocery bag down slowly, as if afraid to make any sudden movements that might fracture what was left of the moment. Emma, he said again, softer this time, as though repeating my name might restore some version of me that hadn't just seen the most intimate parts of my life reduced to digital betrayal. It's not what you think. Those were the 3 words. 3 words that shattered everything. Not because of what they meant, but because of how hollow they rang. He knew exactly what I thought. There wasn't room for interpretation when a text read, "Can't wait to feel you again," signed by my sister. I didn't scream, I didn't sob or fall apart. Instead, I walked to the kitchen counter, picked up the phone with slow, deliberate fingers, and handed it back to him. How long? I asked. He hesitated, glanced down, then back at me. 3 months. The words dropped like stones into the silence. 3 months, I repeated more to myself than him, as if I could file them somewhere, store them in a place where they wouldn't rip at the walls of my chest. It wasn't planned, he said, quickly moving toward me. It just happened. Right, I said, stepping back. Just a casual betrayal. Nothing planned. He ran a hand through his hair, something he always did when nervous. I'd seen that gesture 100 times at client dinners, at family gatherings, during our mortgage meetings. Now it looked foreign, performed by someone I didn't recognize. We didn't mean to hurt you. I laughed, then a short, bitter sound that surprised even me. You're sleeping with my sister, Nathan. What exactly did you think would happen? He sat on the couch like the weight of it all had finally caught up to him. I was going to tell you, he said. I just didn't know how. I stared at him, and suddenly the silence in the room was louder than any shouting match could have been. It wasn't the cheating that broke me. It was the familiarity with which he spoke, like we were negotiating a late payment or a missed appointment. Like he still expected me to take the lead and fix it. Were you going to tell me before the wedding? I asked, my voice flat, or after? He didn't answer. I took off the engagement ring, heavy now like a joke, on my finger and placed it gently on the coffee table between us. The space between us had never felt wider. The next few days blurred into a surreal fog of logistics and emotion. I moved out of our shared space before we ever had the chance to fully move in. My parents were blindsided when I told them why. My father's face darkened like a storm cloud. No daughter of mine would do this to her sister, he said when I told him Claire was the other party. My mother, on the other hand, tried to soften everything like she always did. Honey, hearts are messy. People make mistakes. This isn't a mistake, I told her. It's a choice. And they both made it. Claire called me 3 times the first night. I didn't answer. The 4th time she left a voicemail. I know this is awful, but I didn't plan to fall in love with him. I didn't even think I could. But it just happened. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked on the word sorry, but it only made my stomach turn. She didn't sound devastated. She sounded guilty and defensive, like someone who got caught breaking a rule she didn't believe in. The next day she texted, "Can we talk? I want to explain." I deleted it. I didn't want explanations. I wanted my life back, the version of it that existed before this crack ran through the center of everything. At our next family dinner, I sat across from Claire and Nathan for the first time since it all happened. It was surreal. Claire held his hand openly without shame. My mother made small talk like she was auditioning for a role in a play about cheerful dysfunction. My father, to his credit, barely looked at either of them. "How's work, Emma?" he asked, his eyes steady. "Busy," I said, trying to keep my head above water. "You always do," he replied, and something about the way he said it made me want to cry. But I didn't. I wouldn't give them that. Claire looked at me like she was waiting for something, maybe an explosion, maybe forgiveness. She got neither. I barely spoke to her. I didn't touch the food. The longer I stayed, the more I felt like I was watching someone else's family, someone else's life. So I left early with a tight-lipped smile and a quiet goodbye. I stopped attending family events after that. I couldn't stand the charade. I couldn't stand sitting across from a man who had kissed me goodnight for 5 years and now kissed my sister good morning. The days that followed felt endless. I didn't eat much. I worked late. I moved into a smaller apartment across the city and filled the walls with silence. The engagement ring stayed buried in a drawer, too heavy to wear, too meaningful to throw away. Sometimes I'd open the drawer and stare at it, wondering how something so small could hold so much weight. Friends tried to help, but most didn't know what to say. How do you comfort someone when the betrayal isn't just romantic but familial? When the person who should have stood beside you is the one who stabbed you? My best friend Rachel was the only one who got close to the truth. "You didn't just lose him," she said one night, handing me a glass of wine. "You lost her. And that's a different kind of heartbreak." She was right. Losing Nathan hurt, but losing Claire was like losing a part of myself. The part that believed in shared childhoods and sister secrets and the idea that some bonds couldn't be broken. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the way they moved on so seamlessly, like I was a footnote in a story that used to be mine. They posted pictures. Smiling. Holding hands. A weekend trip to Cannon Beach. A brunch photo with mimosas and captions like "grateful for this one." No mention of the storm left behind. No acknowledgement of the crater where my life used to be. I didn't block them. I couldn't look away. That somehow felt like giving them power. But I muted their accounts, removed our shared photos from frames, tucked away the pieces of my former life like relics of a history I hadn't signed off on. I walked through my days in a kind of emotional haze. I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger comes with energy. What I felt was emptier than that. Like something fundamental had cracked and I was waiting to see if the rest of me would collapse. I went to work. I smiled when I had to. I answered emails and scheduled meetings and performed the version of myself that everyone expected. But inside, everything had gone quiet. It wasn't until weeks later when Rachel asked me a question I hadn't considered that something finally shifted. "Do you want to stay broken or do you want to rebuild?" I didn't answer right away. But that night, lying awake in a bed that still didn't feel like mine, I whispered the answer into the dark: I want to rebuild. I just didn't know where to begin. Grief is a strange thing when no one has died. No casseroles delivered to your door. No somber hugs or whispered condolences. No societal script to follow. Just empty air where people used to be. I found myself standing in the middle of my apartment one Saturday morning staring at a coffee mug that still said E.N. in faded vinyl. And I wondered how long grief could haunt you when the people who caused it were still smiling. Your feed. That's when I decided to try therapy. Not because I believed it would fix anything, but because I needed someone who wasn't already exhausted by the sound of my sadness. Rachel had been my lifeline, bringing wine, distracting me with crime documentaries, texting me memes at midnight, but even she was starting to look at me like she didn't know how to reach the version of me that had survived the wreckage. So I booked a session with Dr. Eleanor Adler. Her online bio was short and direct, trauma-informed, specializes in betrayal and grief, located 5 blocks from my office, and somehow that felt like enough. The waiting room was painted in soft neutrals, the kind of soothing tones that promised nothing would be too sharp in here. I sat on a taupe couch and stared at a bookshelf lined with titles like Attached and The Body Keeps the Score. I wasn't sure which part of me had kept the score, but I knew it was tired of carrying the numbers. Dr. Adler was in her mid-50s with silver-streaked hair pulled into a low bun and a voice like chamomile tea, warm, steady, gently strong. She didn't start with questions. She just asked, "What brings you here today?" and let the silence stretch until I filled it. I told her about Claire, about Nathan, about how my life had folded in on itself like bad origami, and no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't find the creases to unfold it. She listened without interruption, her eyes steady but soft. "You're grieving the loss of a future," she said when I finally stopped talking. "One you had been building for years. The brain doesn't distinguish between the death of a person and the death of a story we believed in. It just feels the absence." That sentence lodged itself somewhere deep in me. The death of a story. That's what it was. I hadn't just lost a partner, I'd lost the plot I thought I was living. Over the next few weeks, I met with her twice a week. At first, it was just venting. Angry spirals and existential questions. How could they do this? Was any of it real? What does it say about me that I didn't see it coming? Dr. Adler never rushed to reassure me. Instead, she asked questions that pulled threads I hadn't realized were tangled. When did you first learn that love meant being needed? What part of you felt safest when things were predictable? Who taught you that showing pain made you weak? I left every session feeling cracked open, but in the best way. Like I was finally letting light into rooms I'd kept shuttered. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done since college. Dr. Adler called it externalizing the storm. At first, my entries were disjointed. Angry paragraphs, sarcasm-laced reflections, half poems. But slowly something changed. The entries became clearer, more honest. One day I wrote I lived in a story someone else wrote for me. And I played the role so well I forgot I could edit the script. I underlined it 3 times. That sentence became my anchor. Outside the therapy room, Rachel remained a quiet hero. She didn't push me to get over it. Instead, she offered space and stability. She came over with takeout on the nights she knew I hadn't eaten. She made me go for walks when she could tell I hadn't moved in days. When I told her about therapy, she didn't mock it or minimize it. She just said, "Good. You deserve to talk to someone who isn't me and doesn't love you enough to want to fix it." One weekend, she dragged me to a yoga class that nearly killed me, but I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Healing wasn't linear. Some days, I felt strong, almost like myself. Other days, the grief snuck in through tiny cracks. A smell, a song, the sight of a couple arguing on the street, and then laughing seconds later. I began to understand that healing wasn't about forgetting or forgiving immediately. It was about making space for both the pain and the hope. Dr. Adler gave me permission to feel both. You can love what was and still mourn what wasn't, she told me. You can feel angry and still be someone who believes in kindness. You can rebuild without pretending it didn't burn. Around week 6, I brought in the ring. The one that used to mean forever. I placed it on her desk and said, "I don't know what to do with this." She didn't touch it. "You don't have to decide now," she said. "You're allowed to let symbols rest before redefining them." I nodded, tears threatening but not falling. The ring stayed in its box for now. Not banished. Not glorified. Just waiting like me. The most surprising shift came not in a grand moment but in the quiet choices. I started buying fresh flowers again. Not because anyone would see them, but because they made my kitchen feel alive. I rearranged my furniture not to erase the past, but to claim the space as mine. I changed my coffee order. I donated the sweaters Nathan used to compliment. I stopped checking Claire's social media. These weren't acts of revenge, they were acts of reclamation. One night, I caught my reflection in the mirror and didn't look away. For the first time in months, I didn't just see the woman who had been betrayed. I saw someone surviving. Someone learning how to breathe without holding her ribs. Someone writing her own damn script. That night I wrote in my journal, "I've cried enough tears for people who didn't stay. From now on I write for myself, grieve for myself, heal for myself." Underneath I added in smaller script, "I'm not okay, but I'm becoming." And maybe for now that was enough. It arrived on a Thursday morning tucked between an electricity bill and a flyer for a dog grooming service I didn't use. At first I didn't notice it. The envelope was thick and elegant, cream-colored with embossed floral edging and gold lettering that caught the sunlight just so. It looked like something out of a bridal magazine. My name was printed in perfect calligraphy, Miss Emma Carter. No return address, but I knew. Of course I knew. I stared at it for a long time, holding it by the corner like it might bite. My heart thudded against my ribs, not out of longing but disbelief. I opened it slowly, like diffusing a bomb, half expecting the paper to explode with irony. Inside was a formal wedding invitation, meticulously designed. Together with their families, Claire Carter and Nathan Whitaker, request the honor of your presence as they unite in marriage. There was a watercolor of the venue, some luxury vineyard 2 hours outside the city, followed by the date 6 weeks away. The dress code, formal garden attire, and at the bottom in Claire's unmistakable handwriting, a personal note, "Emma, I hope you'll come. It would mean everything to have you there. Love, Claire." My first instinct was to shred it, or set it on fire, or drop it in a public trash can far from my apartment like a cursed object. But instead, I placed it face down on the counter, poured myself a glass of wine, yes, before noon, and sat there staring into nothing for a solid hour. Rachel found me like that when she stopped by later. One look at my face and she didn't even ask what was wrong. She just walked into the kitchen and picked up the envelope. "Oh hell no," she muttered, reading it. "She invited me," I said, my voice strangely calm. "To the wedding." "Is she out of her mind?" I shrugged. Apparently not enough to stop her from planning a vineyard wedding with floral embossing. Rachel poured herself a glass too and sat beside me. "You're not going, right?" "I don't know," I said. "Everyone's going to expect me not to. Some of them probably even made bets on it." Rachel blinked. "You want to go, Emma?" "Why I don't want to go," I said. "But I think I need to." She stared at me like I'd just suggested jumping into a volcano for closure. "You don't need to do anything but live your damn life. You owe them nothing." "I know," I whispered. "But I owe myself something." And that was the truth. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about forgiveness. It was about showing up not for them but for me. To look the people who broke me in the eye and let them see that I was still standing. Not bitter, not vindictive, just unbreakable in a way they never expected. The pressure began almost immediately. My mom called the next day with her carefully rehearsed voice. "Claire told me she sent the invitation. She really hopes you'll come, honey. It would mean so much to the family." "To whom exactly?" I asked. "Because it doesn't mean much to me. She's your sister. She slept with my fiancé." I'm not saying what she did was right, my mom sighed. "But maybe this is a chance to show you've moved on. That you're the bigger person." "I'm tired of being the bigger person," I said. "I want to be the free person." Later that week, my dad took me to lunch. We didn't talk about the wedding until dessert. Then he said, "I don't agree with how they got together. You know that, but she's still your sister. And I'm still walking her down the aisle. I'd be proud to have you there. But I'll understand if you say no." It wasn't a guilt trip, it was just honest, and somehow that made it worse. The final nudge came from my cousin Alyssa, who called mostly to gossip. "Everyone's wondering if you'll show," she said breezily. "Uncle Ron thinks you're going to crash the reception in a red dress and slap someone. I told him you were classier than that." "That's oddly flattering." She laughed. Honestly, I hope you do come. You've always been more poised than Claire. And more interesting. Her entire bridal party looks like an Instagram filter. After the call ended, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window. I didn't want to go to the wedding. I needed to. The next morning I called Rachel. If I'm doing this, I said, I want to do it right. There was a beat of silence, then her voice lit up. Say no more. Operation Glow Up is officially in effect. What followed was nothing short of military-level planning. Rachel created a shared spreadsheet with tabs for hair, makeup, outfits, skincare, confidence rituals, even a power playlist. We began weekly Pilates together. She introduced me to her facialist. She can fix divorce face in 2 sessions, Rachel promised. I booked a hair appointment with a stylist who specialized in post-breakup transformations. He took one look at me and said, this betrayal calls for soft waves and strategic highlights. I bought a dress. A crimson satin gown with a low back subtle slit and neckline that said Unbothered Goddess. It was elegant, arresting, but not thirsty. It didn't scream revenge. It whispered rebirth. Each week I could feel myself returning bit by bit. Not to the woman I had been before, but to someone newer. Wiser. Someone who knew pain and still chose beauty. I hope you know, Rachel said during one of our prep nights, this isn't about them. I know. This is about you arriving as the main character in your own damn life. I nodded. Exactly. I wasn't walking into that vineyard to make a scene. I wasn't there to reclaim Nathan or confront Claire. I was walking in to remind myself visibly proudly that no one gets to define my story but me. I RSVP'd, yes. The last thing I expected that night was to meet someone. I'd shown up at the charity event mostly out of obligation. My company had bought a table for a benefit gala supporting urban design initiatives, and as the head of strategic communications, I was expected to make an appearance. I wore a navy jumpsuit I'd almost returned twice and carried a purse just big enough for my phone, lip gloss, and quiet dread. I was halfway through a conversation with a board member about zoning regulations when it happened. A shoulder brushed mine, gentle but enough to tip the edge of my champagne glass. Bubbles sloshed over the rim and landed in perfect arcs on the lapel of someone's charcoal gray suit. Oh no, I gasped, instinctively reaching for a napkin. I'm so sorry. That was totally my fault. The man looked down at the wet fabric, then up at me, smiling. Don't worry about it, he said, voice warm and low. Honestly, this suit was taking itself way too seriously. It needed a little humility. I laughed. Really laughed for the first time in what felt like months. He held out his hand. Daniel Foster. Emma Carter. He raised an eyebrow. Emma Carter as in Carter and Row PR. My turn to raise an eyebrow. I see you've done your research. He smiled again, the kind that started in the eyes. I read your profile in Chicago Monthly last fall. You made zoning policy sound. Well, almost sexy. I rolled my eyes. You clearly didn't read the part about my obsession with budget forecasts. Actually, he said, tilting his head, that was my favorite part. We stepped aside to let a waiter pass. For a few moments, we just stood there, glasses in hand, neither of us pretending to be anywhere else. Daniel turned out to be an architect recently back from a 6-year stint overseas. London. Tokyo. A semester in Copenhagen. His firm had just opened a new office in the city, and he was helping build the Chicago team from scratch. I came back because my niece asked me to, he said casually. She said I missed 3 of her birthdays and she was over it. Hard to argue with that. There was something about him that felt grounded, unhurried. He asked questions and actually waited for the answers. We talked about urban greenspace books we hadn't finished and the best hole-in-the-wall tie in the West Loop. After an hour of conversation that felt like 5 minutes, he said, "This might sound strange, but would you like to get coffee sometime without the dress code and champagne?" I blinked, startled by how natural it felt to say yes. I'd like that. 2 days later, we met for coffee. Then again for a walk along the river. Then dinner, followed by an afternoon at the Art Institute where we discovered a shared love of brutalist architecture and overpriced museum gift shops. It wasn't fireworks, it was something quieter. A softness I hadn't known I needed. On our third outing, seated across from each other in a tiny Italian restaurant with flickering candles and mismatched chairs, I found myself telling him everything. About Nathan. About Claire. About the wedding invitation. I don't know why I'm even going, I admitted, swirling the last of my wine. Closure maybe. Or just plain stubbornness. He leaned forward, slightly not judging. And you're going alone, I hesitated. I was planning to. He nodded slowly, then smiled. What if you didn't? I laughed, assuming he was joking. You're volunteering to come to a stranger's wedding where her ex-fiancé is marrying her sister. I'm excellent at weddings, he said deadpan. I dance with grandmothers, I compliment table arrangements, and I've mastered the art of charming suspicious uncles. Plus, I look great in a suit. I studied him for a moment, unsure. Why would you do that? Because I like spending time with you, he said simply. And maybe because I know a thing or two about betrayal. There was a pause, gentle but weighty. I was engaged once, he said quietly. 3 years ago. Her name was Alicia. She ended it a month before the wedding. Said she fell for someone at work. My chest ached with recognition. Did you go to their wedding? I asked. He smirked. No, but I did send a very tasteful blender. I laughed again, grateful for the levity. So, this is solidarity. This is me offering to walk beside you, he said. No expectations, no pretending. Just back up. I looked down at my plate, then back up at him. It's crazy. Most good stories start that way, he said. We agreed to a few practice runs. Nothing elaborate, just planning how we'd show up, what we'd say if people asked, coordinating outfits. If we're doing this, he said, we're going to do it well. Think of it as emotional dress rehearsal. I let him in slowly. Not just into the plan, but into the quiet corners of my life that I'd walled off. He never pushed. He just showed up, listened, and made me laugh. He asked about my dad's obsession with jazz records. He remembered my coffee order. He recommended books he thought I'd like and asked what music helped me focus. We weren't performing. We were building something real, however unexpected its beginning. One evening, as we practiced our couple story over dinner, I said, "You don't have to do this, you know." He tilted his head. "I want to. And when the wedding's over, we'll see," he said, his voice softer now. "But if it's okay with you, I'd like to keep seeing you beyond the vineyard." There was a long pause. I looked at him, really looked. The man across from me wasn't part of the plan. But maybe the plan had needed rewriting anyway. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's do this." The vineyard looked like a page torn from a magazine. Rows of grapevines stretched toward the horizon, kissed by late spring sun, and a white tent shimmered in the distance, its edges fluttering like a nervous breath. Everywhere I turned, there were flowers, roses, peonies, wild greenery, arranged with such perfection it felt almost theatrical. Claire had always loved a grand stage. Daniel and I stepped out of the car, the gravel crunching beneath our shoes. I wore the crimson dress, the one Rachel had dubbed armor-stitched in satin. It hugged in all the right places, dipped daringly at the back, and moved like fire when I walked. Daniel beside me in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and a pocket square that matched my dress looked like the man dreams were made of. But it wasn't just the clothes. It was the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world. We walked up the stone path hand in hand, heads turned, conversations paused, eyes widened. I didn't smile, I didn't flinch. I didn't owe them performance, I was there for me. Claire saw me first. She was standing near the entrance to the reception tent, her champagne flute frozen midair. Her dress was stunning, of course, lace and silk and expensive understatement, but her smile slipped for just a beat when she caught sight of us. Just a flicker. But I saw it. "Emma," she said when we approached, kissing the air near my cheek as if that could erase history. "You made it." "Of course," I said smoothly. "Wouldn't miss it for the world, and this must be Daniel Foster," he said, extending a hand. "Emma's partner." Claire's smile twitched as she took his hand. "Lovely to meet you." Behind her, Nathan appeared. His face, once so familiar, looked older somehow. Or maybe just smaller. "Emma," he said, awkward. "Thanks for coming, it really means a lot." I nodded once. "Congratulations." then turned just enough to end the moment. Inside the tent, the space glowed with fairy lights and soft jazz. Guests milled about in jewel-toned dresses and tailored suits, sipping champagne, casting glances. I felt the murmurs behind me like a breeze. She looks incredible. Is that her new boyfriend? I wouldn't have come if I were her. She doesn't even look bothered. Good. Daniel's presence grounded me. He wasn't loud, didn't overcompensate. He guided me through awkward introductions, laughed gently at stiff jokes, deflected nosy questions with effortless charm. When one of Claire's bridesmaids leaned in and said, "So, you and Daniel real or revenge?" I just smiled and answered, "Real enough to not care what you think." Daniel chuckled softly. "She's the storm in heels," he whispered as we moved away. We found ourselves seated at a table near the dance floor, surrounded by my father's side of the family. Aunt Caroline gave me a once-over and leaned in. "You're the picture of grace, darling," she said. "Some of us are quietly cheering for you." Across the room, I saw my mother. She didn't smile, didn't wave. Just stared. I could tell she hadn't expected me to come. Not really, certainly not looking like this. The ceremony was scheduled just before sunset under an arch wrapped in white hydrangeas and eucalyptus. We watched as the guests were guided into rows of white chairs facing the golden hills. Daniel placed his hand gently on mine. "You okay?" "I'm not sure what I am," I admitted. "But I'm not angry. Not anymore." He squeezed my fingers. "That's a good sign." The music started, gentle strings, and the wedding party filed down the aisle. Then Claire appeared, radiant in her curated perfection, walking toward the man she'd taken from me. Everyone stood. I didn't. Daniel stayed seated beside me, solid and unshaken. When Claire passed, her eyes found mine for a second. I didn't blink. The vows were beautiful. Empty, but beautiful. Nathan stammered a bit through his voice catching only once when he said, "I promise to always protect you." I wondered if he had rehearsed that line in the mirror. Claire's vows, by contrast, were precise, poetic, confident. She was always good with performance. When they were pronounced husband and wife, applause rippled through the rows. People smiled and rose, some even dabbing tears. But in my chest there was nothing. No pain. No regret. Just space. Like the wound had closed while I wasn't watching. At the reception, Daniel danced with my great aunt, held my clutch when I touched up lipstick, told my skeptical uncle about his architecture work with just enough self-deprecating humor to win him over. "You're a lucky woman," my cousin Melissa whispered as she watched Daniel spin me gently during a slow song. "I know," I said, and for once I meant it without needing to prove it. Claire didn't approach me again that night, but I caught her watching. Not often. Just enough to know my presence unsettled her. And that was enough. Later, as we stood by the open bar, Nathan walked past me alone. He glanced over, and for a moment our eyes locked. There was something in his face, some mix of curiosity, nostalgia, and maybe, just maybe, the first flicker of doubt. But I didn't stop walking. I didn't smile. I owed him nothing. As the night deepened and fairy lights twinkled against the darkness, Daniel and I slipped outside for air. The vineyard stretched around us like a painting. "That went better than expected," he said. "I think I buried something today," I said. He looked at me gently. "A ghost," I nodded. "Or maybe just a version of me that thought she needed closure from other people." "You don't." "No," I said, breathing deeply. "I don't." He reached for my hand. "Come on. I hear they're bringing out late-night espresso and tiramisu." We walked back toward the tent, the music swelling behind us. Claire was the bride that day. But I was the storm that didn't need to rage to be seen. The reception had found its rhythm. The clink of silverware on china, the low hum of jazz, bursts of laughter from the bar, everything glided along in a way that made it easy to forget what brought us here. Easy for some, maybe. Not for me. Daniel and I were seated at a round table near the dance floor. My father's side of the family surrounded us, their polite conversation barely disguising the undercurrent of gossip. From across the room, Claire and Nathan sat at their elevated sweetheart table, beaming for the cameras, their smiles stretched thin by the weight of performance. Dinner had ended and the traditional toasts began. First, the best man rose. Trevor, one of Nathan's oldest friends, told a few safe stories from their college days, avoiding any mention of how this couple came to be. The maid of honor followed Claire's college roommate, gushing about her loyalty, her beauty, her fairy tale romance. I watched Claire sip her champagne, her eyes flicking to me once. The tension was building like a string pulled taut. Then she stood up. I know I wasn't scheduled to speak. Claire began tapping her glass lightly. Her voice was sweet, slightly slurred from celebration, amplified just enough to carry through the tent. But I wanted to say something from the heart. I sat still, fingers on the stem of my glass, feeling Daniel's hand rest lightly on my knee under the table. Everyone here knows how much I love Nathan, she said, smiling toward him. But not everyone knows our full story. Our journey. A hush fell over the room. The air stilled. Sometimes love doesn't arrive in a straight line. Sometimes it takes detours, she continued. And sometimes before you find the person you're meant to be with, there's someone else. The one who came first. She turned toward me, gaze steady, voice syrupy. She was his first choice, Claire said, her smile widening. But I'm the one he chose. There was a moment of stunned silence. Then a few nervous laughs. Someone coughed. Claire raised her glass. To destiny, no matter how messy it gets. She sat down, pleased with herself, the faintest smirk tugging at her lips. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. But inside, something clenched. Then Daniel stood. No microphone. No clinking glass. Just a quiet rising from his chair, commanding attention by being. Every head turned. For those of you I haven't had the pleasure of meeting yet, he began, his voice calm but resonant. I'm Daniel Foster, Emma's partner. A few people straightened up. The name seemed to ring familiar in a few ears. I hadn't planned to speak either, he continued, glancing at me, then out toward the crowd. But I believe when someone draws a line in public, truth deserves its moment too. The tent went still. I've only known Emma for a few months, he said. But in that time I've seen more grace, strength, and integrity in her than most people manage in a lifetime. He paused, letting the words settle. She didn't come here today to reclaim anything. She came because she already knows her worth. She doesn't need to shout to be seen. She doesn't need to wound to feel powerful. He turned his gaze toward Claire, not unkind but unmistakably firm. You called her the first choice. As if that somehow made you the winner. But I've learned that the first choice doesn't always come from love. Sometimes it comes from convenience, expectation, comfort. And, sometimes, from fear. A ripple of shifting chairs. I didn't choose Emma because she was convenient. I didn't choose her because she came first. I chose her because she's extraordinary. Because standing next to her makes me better. Then he glanced around casually but clearly. For anyone wondering, I'm not a placeholder. I'm not a consolation prize. A pause. A slight smile. I'm the upgrade. A stunned silence. And then applause. Not polite clapping. Not awkward golf course pats, real applause. A few people even stood. I sat frozen, blinking, hard, heart thudding in my chest. Not because he'd defended me, but because he'd seen me so clearly, so publicly, so fully. But Daniel wasn't done. I work in architecture, he added, almost offhandedly. I recently returned from overseeing projects in Tokyo and London. Maybe some of you read about the Elwood Tower or the Sato Museum in Architectural Digest. There it was. The hum of recognition. Murmurs, heads swiveling. Oh my God, that's him. Did you see that museum article? He's that Daniel Foster. Daniel raised his glass. To love that doesn't diminish. To people who grow through pain. And to seeing what truly matters before it's gone. He sat. I couldn't speak. My hand found his under the table, squeezing it hard. I turned to him, eyes wet but smile steady. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said quietly, but I wanted to. He looked at me, not for approval, not for applause, just as me. And in that moment, the years of trying to be seen by Nathan, by Claire, by my parents, by the world felt like a weight I could finally set down. He hadn't rescued me. He'd reminded me I didn't need rescuing. The ladies' room was quiet, the hum of the reception muffled behind thick oak doors. I stood alone at the mirror, dabbing a bit of powder beneath my eyes, Not because I needed to look perfect, but because it gave my hands something to do. The door banged open behind me. I didn't need to turn. I knew it was her. Claire's reflection appeared beside mine. Her wedding gown, once pristine, now looked crumpled around the edges. Her carefully pinned hair had begun to loosen, stray curls falling like unspoken thoughts. Her eyes were sharp and red. What the hell was that, she demanded. I met her gaze in the mirror. You'll need to be more specific. Your boyfriend's little performance, she snapped, calling me out in front of everyone, mocking our wedding. I turned slowly to face her. You stood up and called me the first choice, Claire. You turned me into a punchline at your own reception. She looked momentarily thrown. It wasn't personal. It was entirely personal. We stared at each other in silence. A silence filled with too many years, too many words unsaid. Her voice cracked first. You've always had everything, Emma. I blinked. Excuse me, you don't get it, she continued, pacing now. You were the golden girl. The straight-A student. Dad's favorite. Mom's pride, the one everyone noticed. I let out a bitter laugh. Noticed, Claire? I spent my childhood trying not to disappoint. You think that felt like being adored? She stopped pacing. At least they expected something from you. I was always just the pretty one. The one no one took seriously. Not even you. I never thought of you that way, I said honestly. Not once. She looked down at the sink, her hands gripping its porcelain edge. Nathan talked about you all the time, even when we started. Whatever that was between us. Page this, page that. I thought if I could just have something you had, just one thing, I'd stop feeling like your shadow. I felt something in me soften. Not sympathy, not quite. But understanding. So, you took the one person you thought mattered to me, I said. Was it really about him? She shook her head, tears welling up. It stopped being about him a long time ago. I just wanted to be seen. A pause. I did fall in love with him, she added, barely audible. But part of me was thrilled that for once I had something you lost. The honesty of it hit harder than the betrayal ever had. I stepped closer. Claire, I don't hate you. She looked up, startled. Then what do you feel? I considered the question. I feel tired, I said. Tired of competing in a game I never knew we were playing. Tired of trying to protect you while you tried to outshine me. Tired of pretending we're okay when we're anything but. Her lips trembled. I'm sorry. I nodded. I believe you. But that doesn't fix us. Silence again. Heavier this time. I thought your life was perfect, she whispered. But then I saw you tonight, and it wasn't just the dress or the man. It was the peace. You looked like someone who made it out. I swallowed. That peace, I earned it. Through therapy, through tears. Through learning how to stop needing people who hurt me to tell me I'm enough. She wiped her eyes, mascara smearing faintly. So what now? I reached for a tissue and handed it to her, just like I had when we were kids, and she scraped her knee on the sidewalk. Muscle memory. I don't know, I said. This isn't about forgiveness. I don't have that yet. Claire nodded, voice small. Fair, but I can let go, I continued. Of needing anything from you. Of proving anything to you. I don't hate you, Claire. I'm just learning to love myself more than I loved trying to fix this. She took the tissue, pressed it to her face, then looked at me, really looked. Do you think we'll ever be okay again? I think, I said gently. We can start by not pretending. For the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch. And maybe in that sterile bathroom with 2 bright lights and years of bitterness between us, something cracked open, not a full reconciliation, but a fracture in the wall. A beginning. We left before the bouquet toss. The stars had begun to bloom above the vineyard, pinpricks of quiet against a sky that had seen too much. Daniel held the door open for me without a word, and as I slid into the passenger seat, a silence settled between us. Not awkward, not strained, just full. Like the exhale after holding your breath for too long. As the car rolled down the gravel path, I looked back once. The white tent still glowing. The shadows of guests still dancing. Laughter carried faintly through the air like the echo of a story I no longer belonged to. You okay? Daniel asked gently. I think I am, I said. And it was true. No anger, no tears. No dramatic exit or final speech. Just enough. It was done. We drove with the windows down the cool wind, undoing what the stylist had sculpted hours ago. My hair came loose, but I didn't fix it. I wanted the real air, the real night. The real me. I keep waiting to feel something sharp, I said after a while. Like regret or sadness or rage. But all I feel is peace. Daniel nodded, his eyes on the road. That's what happens when you stop carrying what isn't yours. I watched him for a moment. The way his hands rested steady on the wheel. The way he didn't rush to fill silence with promises. How he just let things be. I need you to know something, he said, his voice low but firm. This us, it was never fake for me. Not even in the beginning. I smiled softly. I know. I meant what I said in there, he added. You're not someone I'm here to rescue. You're someone I choose. Freely, fully. And somehow that meant more than any I love you ever had. When we reached my apartment, he walked me to the door. I turned to him, heels in hand, now bare feet against the cool tile. I want to take this slow, I said. I want to do it right. He brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. There's no other way I'd want it. He didn't kiss me that night. He didn't ask to come in. He just squeezed my hand, said "Good night, Emma," and walked away with the kind of quiet that said I'm not going anywhere. Inside, I poured myself tea. Not wine. Not whiskey. Just chamomile, something warm and steady. I lit a candle and opened my journal, the pages now almost full. I wrote, "Tonight I watched the man who broke me marry the sister who betrayed me. And I didn't break. I didn't cry. I didn't plot. I didn't even need closure from them. Because closure doesn't come from people who hurt you. It comes when you stop waiting for it. I didn't win tonight, I just healed." I closed the journal. In the days that followed, the family reached out. My mother left voicemails. "I think we should talk. You and Claire. It's time to move on." I didn't call back, not out of spite, but because I was choosing stillness. Choosing boundaries. Choosing me. I responded to my father's texts. He never asked for more than I could give. Just short messages like "Proud of you, pumpkin," or "Dinner soon." Just us. I said yes. Just us. That felt safe. Claire didn't reach out. And I didn't reach for her. Some wounds don't close with stitches. They close with silence, with distance, with time. I saw photos from their honeymoon on social media, white beaches, forced smiles, captions about new beginnings. I didn't feel anything except the faint ache of recognition. She still wants to be seen. But I was done performing. Rachel called. "So, did you burn the place down or walk out?" Glowing, "Neither," I said. "I just walked out." She paused. "That's the most powerful thing you could have done." I smiled. "I know." Daniel and I continued. Not like a storybook ending, but like real people. We made pasta from scratch and burned the sauce. We argued once about whose turn it was to do laundry. He kissed my forehead when I had a migraine and didn't ask me to explain my silence. It was calm. It was new. It was enough. One night he handed me a small key. "No pressure," he said. "Just, I want you to know you're welcome." I took it. Not because I was ready to move in, but because I was ready to stop running. This wasn't the life I'd imagined, white dress, perfect man, parents beaming. It was better. It was mine. It's been a year since that wedding. A year since I stood beneath twinkling lights in a crimson dress and watched my past vow itself away in white lace. A year since I left a vineyard under the stars and stepped into a life I hadn't planned but now couldn't imagine being without. Daniel and I live together in a corner apartment with high ceilings and too many plants, most of which he insists are thriving, even though I'm sure 3 of them are fake. We take our time. There's no ring on my finger. No wedding boards or countdowns. Just shared groceries, Sunday mornings in bed with books and coffee, arguments about paint swatches, and quiet companionship that feels like oxygen. He still kisses my forehead when I overthink, still holds space for silence when I need it. Some nights we cook together and laugh so much we forget to eat until midnight. Other nights we exist side by side reading or working connected by nothing but the gentle rhythm of being. We're not building a fairy tale. We're building a life. And that feels infinitely better. Claire reached out 2 months ago. A short email. No justifications, just I've started therapy. I don't know where it will take me, but I thought you should know. I'm sorry again. I mean it. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then replied, thank you. I hope you find peace. I didn't attach emotion to it. I didn't wait for a reply. But when Rachel heard, she said, that's the most hopeful thing I've heard all year. And maybe it was. Healing isn't always two people walking toward each other. Sometimes it's just them no longer walking away from themselves. My relationship with my parents has shifted too. We don't talk about what happened anymore. Not because we're ignoring it, but because we've finally learned to live beyond it. My father has stopped trying to fix everything. My mother still occasionally sends passive-aggressive suggestions like, "You'd look beautiful in ivory," to which I now reply with a picture of Daniel in a pink apron making pancakes. Boundaries have become my most sacred form of self-respect. I choose what I carry now, and I carry light. Last week, while cleaning the closet, I found the wedding invitation again. The one with Claire and Nathan's names embossed in gold. I remember the first time I saw it, how my hands shook, how my chest caved, and how I thought it was the final cruelty. I almost burned it. Almost mailed it back with a note scrawled in fury. But something made me keep it. Now holding it again, I don't feel rage or heartbreak. I feel reverence. Because this glossy, over-designed envelope was the spark, not of destruction but of transformation. If that invitation hadn't come, I might still be sleepwalking through the life I thought I wanted. Still defining myself by someone else's love, still shrinking to fit the outlines drawn by people who never really saw me. That envelope cracked my world open. And through that crack, light got in. I framed it. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. Of who I was, of what I survived, of where it all began. I think about the Emma who sat alone in that apartment staring at a screen full of betrayal. I wish I could reach back through time and whisper, this isn't the end, it's the door, walk through it. And now as I sit by the window with a journal open on my lap, Daniel humming in the kitchen, the city outside glowing with life. I write the words I once never believed I'd reach. Sometimes the ugliest endings lead to the most beautiful beginnings. And I know finally, it's not just a line in a story. It's my truth. It's my story. And it's only just beginning.